Should we get meta? We've been trying to record the intro for like 15 minutes right now, and it's really difficult. And basically, we make a show where we do things in a live stream, and when you record things, it really makes you get in your head. So what we really advise is doing a live stream when you're trying to make things. It's way easier.
Yeah, that's actually a lesson we forgot to put in all the stuff we recorded so far, is to use the whole buffalo, right? Like cut out. We do our summaries of our stream in the stream.
So we started off with this excellent vintage database. Thank you for bringing it along, RJ. And it has all these like nice little details and touches to it.
We posted to Twitter, and YouTube, and all that good stuff. And it's so much easier than actually editing 3 hours of video.
Yeah. Hi, I'm EJ.
And I'm Ian.
Yeah, we've been saying our names for a while now.
Yeah. And then we can't even talk about who we are. You know, we met at a little data viz startup that, you know, didn't end up doing a whole lot. I mean, it did a lot for us.
It did a lot for us, not a lot for the world.
In the meantime, we've each, you know, done a lot of data viz for our day jobs, different organizations. You know, I was at Google, you're at NBC. And so we spent a lot of time being pretty serious about data viz, but it's also a lot of fun for us. And the way that we kind of became friends was that we would jam out sort of after hours, you know, with a little bit of extra smoke in the air, sometimes just getting creative, you know, like a little jazz session or something.
Exactly. Jamming out with data viz.
But we just really want to see the folks that are talking and attending at Outlier doing more stuff like this.
I really love this example because we were working on this piece and looking for different color palettes. And Helen Earth who is a regular in the chat, dropped in a notebook that Shirley Wu had made, which had a bunch of palettes for us to pick from. So we just instantly sort of grabbed it and integrated that into what we were working on. But it's that type of collaboration of like having the chat pitch in with places where they can help, and just being able to like pull that in and have it reflect on the stream instantly is a lot of fun, I think, both for us as performers and also for the audience.
This was one of my favorite streams because we took emojis, something that everybody knows, right? And like we use all the time, and put them through our data viz process in this like really straightforward way, kind of use something from the observable community to get the colors. And we ended up with like this really visually interesting, kind of beautiful way of looking at emojis that was totally unexpected, right? And
yeah, we didn't plan out any of these visualizations. We just sort of said, okay, let's like, we have this emoji data set. What fun can we have with it, right? If you're thinking about live streaming, I think that you should definitely go do it. Like we found, from doing this, we've not only made a lot of work that we're proud of, but we've also met a lot of really cool people, guests on the show, people who hang out in the chat. We've learned a lot about our process, you know, and we've also, like, I got to hang out with my friend every week and make some really cool stuff together. So I think we both recommend giving this a try. Like find a buddy, stream yourselves making something, and see how you like it.
I think one of the benefits that I didn't know going in that would be so fun and enriching is that, yeah, like we could invite folks that we look up to onto the stream to not only like share their knowledge and their work, but help us make something, right? So we had RJ Andrews come on and show us some historical visualizations that he was into. He collects a lot and knows a lot about it. But on the show, he came on and helped us build something. Like we recreated one of the historical visualizations that he was into live together. And so he was able to guide us with his insight through the course of that hour or so that we spent together. And that's something I never would have, I don't know, imagined being able to do, right? Be like, hey, RJ, like spend an hour with us and, you know, help us make something, right? It's like, that's way too expensive.
Yeah. Should we advise people to code with a partner? I'm full on don't live stream alone. It's dangerous and scary. But I'm curious, I don't know. What do you think about it?
I think so. I think like, well, we could because there are people doing it well, like Shirley and this like Will guy.
That's true. It just seems like, okay, I think to do it yourself is advanced level streaming, is what I would say.
Yeah.
And that the people who do it are extraordinarily talented to be able to maintain a stream by themselves for long periods of time. Like, that's incredible.
Yeah.
When you're figuring out a difficult thing, it's really hard to talk out loud and also figure out that difficult thing. So what's nice when you have another person on the show is they can sort of vamp and sort of fill that dead air with like talking to the chat or talking about what you're working on or asking questions like while the other person writes code or figures things out. And I think a lot of what we've figured out over time is like figuring out a way to bounce back and forth between that of like, when I know you're working on something or writing some code, then I'll sort of like take up that space for you and vice versa, right?
I think that I like to feel prepared in that, you know, the camera, I see what I look like. What's on my screen is something that I'd be happy to talk about, knowing that it will, you know, I'll be changing what's on the screen but I'm a very show and tell oriented person. I don't know. It's just like, I feel like as long as I have something to talk about, like a thing that I can talk about it, right? Like, and
yeah, so that's mostly what we do is we just like have a quick call before the show and we're like, what do you want to talk about this week? And that's like the pre-production, right?
Yep.
Yeah, it's mostly an outline. It's kind of like we don't script it, right? Like we just sort of go through like, all right, like I found this really cool tweet this week, let's do something like that. Or like, oh, you had that data set that you've been working with, you want to do something with that. And it's just like a loose outline of things that we could approach.
Yeah, I guess based on that, I like on a very tactical level edit the title of the stream and, you know, what kind of summarize what we say, like what we figure out. And then when you hit the button to go live, that goes out to people. And
do you have any tips for writing, like how to write those notifications or how to make the stream title?
I think the title I found is more, I optimize it kind of for like being able to, for me to be able to remember what it was. Like, okay, so we started doing episode numbers, right? Like even if you don't know how many episodes you're going to have in a season, like just arbitrarily doing that every time makes it much easier to look back on the things like we found, right? Like we did, totally. I think it was like 30 episodes, like 30 streams in our first season.
I think like before we even started like counting, right? Like, or, you know what I mean? Like we sort of just did them. And then we were like, oh, it'd be kind of useful to like know which episode we're on or know how many we've done or like which episode we did which thing.
Yeah. And I'll put, you know, if we know, like in this was one of the last ones we did, it was like, we had some hospital data and we wanted to mess around with some 3D stuff. And so just kind of put those in there. And then the date is something that, you know, you'd hope these systems would all keep track of, but it ends up being like, you know, Twitch doesn't really, like it tells you the date, but like if you export it to YouTube. And then the other thing is like the live notification. I feel like on Twitch, that's how most people are going to come to the stream, right? Is like, Twitch will notify anybody who's subscribed to you with like, hey, you know, Ian and EJ are going live. I know that's how I like end up joining streams a lot of the time.
Yeah, me too. Well, it's that and Twitter. So we should talk about like the Twitter side of things too, because that's like in my opinion where most of our viewers come from. Like for me, like a lot of like my work. Yeah, I mean like a lot of my connections and database come through Twitter anyway. You know, so yeah, I don't know what's the best way to sort of make a tweet to get people to come to your stream?
Yeah, so I'll show something from actually this morning. I ended up helping Makio here, Lionel, start his first live coding stream kind of in a similar spirit to the way we've been doing it. And it's, I mean, you know, it's always the basics of like when and who, what, when, where. And I think the screenshot should kind of be the why, honestly, like always have visuals.
Totally.
You know, like, especially in the nature of that work that we do, but like, cause he was actually doing the live coding. I started taking screenshots throughout and tweeting them, and then I would always include the link back to the stream. And that does, I think, we found that we end up streaming for hours, right? It may be like 3 hours. I think Lionel and I did almost 2 hours, and it's not really realistic for people to watch 3 hours straight necessarily. Like maybe sometimes people have the time.
Yeah, shout out to the people who do
in the background. Yeah. Like we got some folks that like participate, which is really fun. But like I think we've noticed that it ends up being kind of like an hour per segment, right? Like we do something for an hour, and people will tune in, watch that, and then go on about their day. And then new people will come in for the next hour. And then the tweets kind of help that. It's like, hey, right now we're doing this. And someone who didn't necessarily care so much about the like data viz technique, but was really interested in the generative art technique, will like join and tune in for that.
And it's also just the philosophy of working in the open, right? Like I like working like that, whether I'm streaming or not. It's always good I always get good feedback from posting in progress stuff on Twitter, and asking people what they think. At least in the data viz community, I'm sure there's places where that might be more cruel or harder to do, or tougher to take. But I think we're really lucky to have colleagues who like are really willing to give good criticism and good feedback on stuff you're working on.
Yeah, and sort of related to that, like back in the stream, right? There's the chat. So like I often have this in my like second monitor open so that I can kind of keep an eye. Well, this will be muted and it'll show the video, but what I'm really paying attention is the chat. And like we try really hard to share the links that we're looking at in our, because we both have a browser open, and whatever we may pull up, we'll put in the chat. I think what we found and what we've really done is like every stream we make something. We make more than one thing usually, but like we know from the beginning we're going to make something. And there's a lot, that's a pretty broad statement, but like, so Makio has made some like epic stuff, right? Like it's just beautiful after beautiful thing.
Yep.
He put together this amazing notebook that not only showcases the work, but also like the tools and the techniques and like educational materials. It goes from, SVG stuff to like pen plotters to like crazy like motion graphics, right? Like we spent a long time talking about this, looking at stuff. I was asking, I'm super curious. Like I've read this whole post. I've like studied his notebooks. I was really excited to like get to talk to him about it. But about, 45 minutes in, he was just like, well, should we like make something, And I was like, yeah, let's. And he started a new like an empty notebook, and started, I asked him how he gets started. He talked about how he usually sees someone, like a piece of art from somewhere in social media, Instagram, wherever, like people he's following. And he feels like, that's a really cool technique. Maybe I can, reproduce it, apply it in my own way, tinkering and trying to figure it out. And like, that's what we did. And that last half of the stream was like really cool, right? Because that then, from my perspective, I'm seeing someone whose work I really respect, like build like from zero, scratch, like, and so it was super informative, and it was really fun, right? And he had a bug at one point where he was accidentally scaling the y-axis to 0 or something and squishing everything away, and he was kind of like trying to figure it out, and someone in the chat pointed it out, right? Cool. And like, it's like immediate. It's just like the benefits of making in the open, like immediately came out, and it was just really exciting to see it unfold. And like, yeah, so I think that like it just reaffirmed that this idea of making something on the stream is really where the magic is. Totally. Like that's what's gonna.
Well, that also comes from the model of our influences, right? So like we can talk like when we talk about the type of show we want to make, like we talk about like cooking shows, and we talk about like Mythbusters. And to me, like the things that tie those two like very different types of show together is that like they're making stuff. And you don't have to be a chef, and you don't have to know how to build things to be really interested in somebody making something, right? we knew that we wanted to like do some sort of stream for a while. Like we had talked about it, and like we didn't have a name for it, and a lot of things came together when we found the name. But I think even in those early conversations, it was like, all right, let's do. If you want to do a show, like what kind of show do you want to do? You know what I mean? Like what's the model? Like what's something out there that maybe isn't coding or data viz, but like fits the sort of vibe of the thing that we want to make. You know, and we picked cooking show. You know, but we could have picked like History Channel, Ancient Alien. You know what I mean? Like, and that would have had a totally different vibe and model to how we, right? Like, I think that's a way to think about it.
I want to see like a David Attenborough show of like existing notebooks.
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
I mean, but do we need to go even further back? Because like even the reason we felt like we could cook on air or code on air, right? Like, what drives that? Like, I mean, we've talked about making stuff in the open and like how we've come to believe in that, but to do it live, right? Like it's something like else.
Well, it's funny. Yeah, I mean, it was cool to find that blog post that I found last week where it was like, it's from 2012 or 2013, and it's like, oh, Ian just made this cool tributary thing. And it's a lot of fun to play with, and it makes coding feel more like performance, because when you have these sliders and it's so easy to iterate, like it feels a lot less like engineering a machine and a lot more like playing an instrument. So I think that was 8 years ago. So we've been sort of riding this code as instrument wave for a while, right? But without ever performing. Like we were like, I don't know the metaphor for it, but like we never really showed other people what we were working. Like it was all for ourselves, right?
Yeah, it was like a garage band kind of thing.
Yeah.
Like,
that's a great metaphor.
We're hanging out in the garage, jamming out, and yeah. I mean, part of that too then is like Observable coming onto the scene and being an environment where it like evolved. It basically became an instrument. Like it's the first time an instrument is actually solid enough to perform, right? Like we had Tributary back then, and then, you know, Block Builder was another like evolution of that. But Observable is the first time where enough features, enough things work the way you'd need them to for us to perform the way that is like natural enough. I think that this idea of like what is good TV is really important, right? Like, because I think for a lot of, you know, myself not working in TV and you know, I consumed plenty of TV growing up, but like didn't critically think about it. But like you've worked in TV, right? Like,
right, yeah.
So
I guess that's worth talking about, is that I did accumulate a bunch of like weird intuition from working at NBC, of like being surrounded by incredibly talented producers and directors and all these folks who just like had TV in their DNA. You just have that model of what we're trying to accomplish. You know what I mean? So if our model's a cooking show, right? If we go on and we're trying to make a dish, if you think about a cooking show, like they don't normally show them going to the market and getting the ingredients, right? They don't normally necessarily show them chopping up all the, you know, carrots and onions and celery to get, you know what I mean? Like normally it cuts to the competition and like they get their ingredients and they're fresh and, you know, they execute the thing. So like with that model in mind, when we're making our show, I just sort of run it through that algorithm of like, all right, if this were part of the cooking show, like would they include it? Would it be interesting? And maybe the answer is yeah, like maybe going to market and getting the ingredients is like a really cool part and is worth talking about, but it's useful to frame it differently, to frame it out of the like coding on TV aspect and just think about it as like, all right, it's TV. So I think that's part of the reason I'm giving this talk, right? Is like, I really want more people to make more shows, you know? And if you have a cool idea for a show, like get in touch. I want to help you make it. I want to see more stuff out there because we all sort of build on each other, you know what I mean? And it's going to make everything, it's going to make everyone better. You know what I mean? The more people that are making this, the more people that are figuring things out about it. Like I'm really excited to see, you know, but between the people that are attending and speaking at this conference, like what might come of more of that work being live streamed or more of that work being in the open.